interrupt your program to bring you this important podcast. How to 911.
Can you put me out of service on a podcast, please?
Now we're going to go on to the police side of questioning, which is a little bit more geared towards safety of officer and caller. Mm-hmm. Just because police aren't there to put your fire out, they're there to save you from whatever dangerous situation you're in. So, yes. First question, we've talked about this a whole lot, usually with calls. Are there any weapons involved? Mm-hmm. I mean, that also depends on, like, where the caller starts the conversation. Because they'll say, my so-and-so is attacking me and they've been doing drugs all day and they have a warrant and, like, all of this information. So maybe if you have a warrant, they have a warrant. Okay, what is their name? Like, let's start getting that through. Mm-hmm. And then, like, it might be out of order, but weapons is definitely one of those really important questions, mm-hmm. especially if somebody is being violent. We need to know, do they have any weapons? Have they threatened to use those weapons? Or are there any weapons in the home that they could use to harm you or the officers or themselves? So we want to be aware of those kinds of things. Like I said, in my weird scenario that I just gave, are there any drugs involved? Because drugs have as we all know, they change your mind and they change your body reflexes. They change a lot of things with your perception of what's going on and your perception of what you're doing. So those are important to know. Like, yeah, I mean, all these different drugs have different reactions to bodies. People could react differently to those drugs. I mean, obviously it's to get them high, but not everybody has the same experience while on those drugs. And sometimes, depending on mixes of drugs, you can feel no pain. Right. The adrenaline, mm-hmm. you're just, like, so hyped up, you're so amped up, you feel no pain, you have, like, human strength, like, that might take more than one officer to restrain you, or I keep saying you, to restrain the party, mm-hmm. And, like, de-escalate the situation. So drugs are important, especially if somebody has a history of violence with drugs. Alcohol is important because, again, it alters your mind, it alters your body. Yeah. I don't really have to go back into what I just said. So, mental health is also important to know in some cases. By the time this comes out, we have our episode out with Jesse Boyd and Susan Doctor from Summit Stone Mental Health, and they talk a lot about the things that they do and the things that they handle. So hopefully you have kind of an understanding as to why, like, police do respond out to mental health calls, mm-hmm. because there is the unfortunate connection between mental health and violence in some cases. So, and also if they've been taking their medications with their mental health disorder that they have, that's important. If they do take medications, have they been diagnosed with have they been diagnosed with something? That's important to know, because it's like, what have they been diagnosed with? Is it schizophrenia? Is it depression? Yeah. What's going on? Like, what kind of situation should the officer be aware for? Yeah. Because schizophrenia is different than depression. Mm-hmm. Like, they would handle that completely different, and we would handle that completely different on a phone call. The next important question that we would ask for just general police calls are suspect descriptions, mm-hmm. and how many. We kind of talk about this with, we have a second episode with Matthew from LCSO. Not sure when's going to come out first. This one's going to come out first. So stay tuned for that episode with Matthew. But we basically talk about, like, we need to know who's the suspect, what are they wearing, what do they look like, are there more than one suspect? Mm-hmm. Because if it's like a bar fight, like, people are going to start running when cops get there. So it's nice to know for the officers, like, who are they looking for specifically, so they can just scan the crowd and say, that's not a red shirt, that's not a red shirt, that's not a red shirt, that's a red shirt, but he's wearing shorts and it said blue jeans, so I'm going to go to the next red shirt. So it's just kind of nice so that people that aren't the suspect don't get involved with that kind of situation, because especially if it's a fight, if there's weapons involved, mm-hmm. officers are going to be a little bit more forceful with that kind of situation versus just walking up to somebody who was a victim of a crime.
Sure.
So we don't want to confuse the victims or the suspects. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool.
Like, they're violent. We don't want to just, like...
Yeah, we don't want to just be like, you need to stop that.
Yeah.
And don't want to walk up to them and be like, hey, did you hear there's a fight? Do you know who's involved? Oh, it's you, and you just shot me?
Oh, dear.
Oh, no. So next thing that's important are vehicle descriptions, because sometimes, especially in, like, if you're at home with somebody during an incident in which you need police, that person could see you calling the police and say, bye, I'm getting out of here, I'm going to take my car and go. So vehicle description, is it a truck, is it a car, is it an SUV? If you don't know the make and model, like, colors are important, if there's stickers, like, those things are so important. Like, the more information you have, the better. License plates are important, if you're able to get that. And then direction of travel. So we've talked about this all the time. Did they leave east or west from your house? Did they go north? Like, there's this one call. We found him. I don't know how, but someone called in and they said, oh, he's leaving from this address and he's going towards Estes Park. They were in the south side of town. So, like, there were several different ways in which this person could have gone to Estes Park. Officer found him. It was so weird. And so, I aired it because it was a Ready report. And I aired it, and one of the officers picked it up, and I was just like, good luck, buddy.
Yep.
Yeah. You heard me say, like, unknown direction to travel, just known going towards Estes Park. So, you got him.
It's impressive.
Yeah, very impressive. So, I mean, anything helps, obviously.
Yes.
Like, those officers, man, I swear. They're smart. And, the person gave a plate, they gave a vehicle description, they gave the driver description. So, we had, like, really good information, so... Yeah, that's why it's important. Because if it was just a black Jeep, then the officers are going to be looking for every single black Jeep. And it's like, if I can't prove that this is that black Jeep, I'm just going to follow them for a bit and then see if anything's suspicious. And if not, I'm just going to find the next black Jeep. But again, black Jeep is still important. But if there's a yellow sticker, it's helpful. Yes. So kind of, those are the general questions that we'll ask for most police calls. Can you think of anything... different besides the one that I skipped, because I want to talk about that separately. No? Yeah, so those are the key points. I mean, we'll ask names, we'll ask date of birth, especially if there's a warrant involved, if there's a restraining order involved, if somebody went missing, the date of birth is important to have so we can possibly look up pictures. So yeah, don't think that we're just asking for a date of birth because whatever reason we're using it as a tool to look up those warrants, to look up that restraining order, to look up pictures for the person that's missing. So we're using it for a reason. We're not just asking a dumb question. All of these, any questions we ask, we're doing it for a reason. Next thing for police that I kind of want to talk about are like civil issues. So here at the Loveland Police Department, we do civil standbys for 20 minutes. For no longer than 20 minutes, and it's the day of. So we advise to call back at least an hour or 30 minutes before you need the civil standby if you think you can handle it within that 20-minute increment. Otherwise, we can't set up a standby for like next week with that 20-minute increment. Just call the day of an hour to 30 minutes before. We say an hour to 30 minutes before because with in-progress emergencies going on, car accidents, like... people getting hurt, like other things that officers need to go to, like now, the civil standby is going to be put on the board and it's going to be put on hold if other things are coming in that have that higher priority. So just understand that that's why we ask for the time frame, and you have to be patient with us to know that it is a lower priority and we'll get to it when we have the officers available. So we're not just trying to shove you to the side, we're just trying to advise you to realize that it might take some time. So if you need a civil standby for longer than 20 minutes, that is something that you will have to hire an off-duty officer for, which will transfer you to one of our administrators, and she helps set that up. Which we're more than happy to help with those things. It's just, again, our street officers are there for emergencies, so we can't just sit there for 2 hours while you're exchanging property with somebody. Going along that lines for civil, we do not stand by for custody exchanges. because it is a civil process. Like that civil paperwork that you have that agrees that this custody has to happen at this time between these two people at this place, or whatever your custody paperwork says. Officers cannot enforce that. It's a civil document, and at least our Loveland police officers cannot enforce civil documents when it comes to custody. So if you need to have a safe place to do a custody exchange, we always say to come to the police department. There's cameras here so we can watch and make sure that nothing happens, or go to a public place like Walmart, or just something where if you feel like you're not safe, go to a public place. But if you feel like you are in danger and there have been threats, like that makes it a little bit more serious. So maybe we can have an officer work with you and see if there is a need for an officer to be there. But just for regular custody exchanges, we do not do those. Other civil things are like you gave your car to birds just came out the window. So like you gave your car to a friend or to your family member, and you gave that verbal agreement of, hey, here's my car keys, just bring it back in a couple of weeks. And now you can't get a hold of them, and now your car is gone. That's a civil issue because you gave them the car, you gave them your property, so now you have to go to court to get that property back. That's not anything criminal per se.
Right.
Yeah. So things also fall along the line with that are like leases with apartments, anything that you have an issue with your landlord, unless it's like they're poisoning your water or something that's like life damaging, you'll have to go to civil court to figure that out. What else? If you give your friend money, that's another thing. Yeah, loaning them money and they're not paying you back. If like you get services from like a car dealership or hair services or whatever services that you paid for, but you didn't get the quality of service that you were wanting, like they charged you $500 to replace something on your car and it's still broken, that's something, again, you'll have to go through civil court. That's not a criminal law thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, all civil.
Yeah, all civil. What else? We try really hard to explain this to people. I obviously am not very good at explaining the legality as to why it's civil versus criminal. I just know that it's civil.
Right.
Because that's what I'm trained to know. So, I mean, if you want better explanation, an officer can give you that explanation.
Yeah.
A better explanation. But again, like, they're handling in progress emergencies. So they might call you back after an hour or so, depending on how busy we are. So just be prepared for that. Yeah. Yep. What else?
I'm trying to think about, you did the, I was thinking of like a business and a private party too. Thinking about that as far as civil. Covered that.
Right. Like Walmart won't let me in because I'm not wearing a mask. If you want to sue them, that's great, but officers can't tell them to let you in because they're a private business. That's their right as a private business to do that. And like we talked earlier with one of our episodes with our traffic officers, Officer Lorenzen and Mayers, they talk about the difference between private property crashes and public property. Like private property is civil because it's not a location in which officers can enforce those traffic laws. So, yeah. Also something to remember is custody kidnap cases. I'll have an officer call you and see if it is something that is criminal, because we've seen Dateline. There are cases where someone who does not have custody of the child, either at that time or at all, takes the child. Like that is a custody kidnapping, depending on the circumstances. So if that does happen and somebody says they just took the kid, depending on the situation, I'll say, or they're like, he's not returning the kid or she's not returning the kid, and darn it, I want my kid back. You'll have to go to court. But like, if you know where they live, if they didn't just disappear off the edge of the earth, you'll have to go to court and refight for those custody arrangements. Unfortunately, officers, like I said, can't enforce custody agreements. But if that person took the kid and just ran off to Mexico, that's a different situation, and that's something that needs to be looked at a little bit more.
Right.
I don't know the differences. Hopefully that you understand that the difference is that, like, this person is just unwilling to give the child back versus literally taking the kid and just vanishing.
Yeah.
Like, are they unwilling, or are you just not wanting to work together?
Yeah.
Is that a good way to put it? It's like police, unfortunately, sometimes get used as a tool to help solve these situations in which, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes it just takes, like, the one step to say, hey, let's work this out versus, like, trying to just get police involved. Yeah. But, I mean, again, there are circumstances in which police do need to get involved, and that's what we're here for. If there's an argument, if someone's threatening, we're here to help. But just if the issue is that, like, my kid doesn't want to come back from his dad's house or his mom's house, like, can't force the kid to leave.
Right. If
there's no life-threatening danger at that time. Yeah. Is that it?
I think so.
Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not trying to, like, downplay any of these situations and say, like, your call isn't important because of this. It's important. Call us and ask us if you have questions, if you think police officers should be involved, and we'll help you. If there's times where I'm like, I don't know, that's weird, I'll have an officer call you. Please call us. Like, I'm not just saying if your ex or whatever the situation is won't return a child or won't return property, don't call the police. If you feel like something's going on, please call us, and I'd be more than happy to have an officer call you or help you with the situation. I'm just saying that there are times in which the situation could solve itself. Yeah. Before officers get involved. Right. So that's all I'm trying to say. I'm sorry if that's not coming off right. Okay. Great. So thanks for listening. Next time, we're going to be talking about our medical side of questioning, which is our EMD protocols, emergency medical dispatching. That's what we do all the time is emergency dispatching, but we're emergency medically dispatching. Specifically. I know, specifically. So we'll go in depth a little bit more about how those kinds of calls go. It's going to be a very long episode. We started recording it before this episode and realized how in depth it is because we really break down, like, each individual path that we can take through our medical protocols, why we do this, why this question's important, why this response is being sent, all of these things, which I'm sure we could do for fire and police, but that's just not as fun. Right. We don't have cards that tell us what to do.
Visual isn't as
fun. The visual's not fun. So until then, follow us on Facebook at Loveland Emergency Communication Center and on Instagram at How-To-911 Podcast. We also have YouTube at How-To-911 Podcast. Then email us any questions, like we said a million times through this episode. The email is howto911@cityofloveland.org. And then you know the drill, know where you are, know your phone number, and tell us exactly what happened.